After intercepting a communications line, British intelligence discovered that the Argentinian Navy was plotting a massive attack on the Falkland Islands, a small archipelago that both nations claimed as their own. On April 29, 1982, a British nuclear submarine spotted the ARA General Belgrano light cruiser approaching a couple of 100 miles from the exclusion zone. However, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and her war cabinet considered that the heavily armed cruiser was too close for comfort, and the Iron Lady gave the order to fire against the vessel. 41 years after surviving the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the former USS Phoenix, now General Belgrano, was close to being sunk by the United States Navy's ultimate ally. Argentine cruiser. General Belgrano was launched in 1938 and started her career as a United States Navy vessel called USS Phoenix. In the afternoon of December 7, 1941, the 608-foot, 13,645-ton Brooklyn-class cruiser was part of the Navy task force hunting down Japanese vessels, but she survived the initial attack on Pearl Harbor. In early 1942, she departed for the South Pacific Ocean, serving in the Allied efforts to prevent Japan's conquest of the Dutch East Indies. The ship and her crew continued to serve in the Pacific for the rest of the war and earned 9 battle stars for her service. After World War II, the cruiser remained in mothballs until 1950, when she was converted for foreign sale. In a deal stipulated by an agreement between the United States and NATO to distribute military assets with other countries, Argentina agreed to pay $7.8 million for Phoenix, as well as her sister ship USS Boise. They would replace the aging dreadnoughts that the Argentinian Navy had owned since the early 20th century. The transfer was finalized on October 17, 1951, and the ship was aptly recommissioned as ARA 17 de Octubre in commemoration of the beginning of the country's Peronist movement in 1945, when the country's leader, Juan Perón, emerged from a stint in prison. However, that name was short-lived, and after Perón was overthrown in an internal coup, the ship was renamed General Belgrano after the famous independence leader. In the late 1960s, General Belgrano was modernized and equipped with 2 British Sea-Cat missile launchers, an early anti-aircraft weapon system that fired a missile capable of traveling at Mach 0.8 speeds. For decades, the cruiser's once eventful career came to a quiet streak, but that would change one fateful day in the early 1980s. Invasion of the Falklands. In the early hours of April 2, 1982, a detachment of Argentine commandos landed on the Falkland Islands. Located in the South Atlantic Ocean, only 300 miles away from the Patagonian border, the sovereignty of this small South Atlantic archipelago had long been disputed between Argentina and the United Kingdom. The decision to invade the Falklands was planned by the Argentinian government to bolster national pride in their claim and draw attention away from economic and human rights issues in the Latin American nation. As the Argentine Navy forces landed on the settlement's capital, Port Stanley, the men captured the area despite fierce resistance from the Royal Marines stationed there. After the Argentinian troops occupied the islands, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher immediately dispatched a significant naval task force to the archipelago. With a massive convoy consisting of 127 ships steaming south, the United Kingdom imposed a 200-mile exclusion zone around the seized islands on April 23rd. The order established that any Argentinian vessel entering that radius would be immediately fired upon. Exclusion zone. By the end of the month, the main body of the British naval convoy had arrived, and the Falklands conflict began to heat up. Despite the danger, the Argentinian top brass decided to dispatch General Belgrano and 2 additional escort destroyers on a patrol mission south of the archipelago. Unfortunately for the Argentines, General Belgrano was detected by the British Churchill-class nuclear-powered fleet submarine HMS Conqueror 3 days later. As Conqueror shadowed the Argentinian trio, the British government debated the appropriate course of action. Eventually, the prohibited area was intensified to a total exclusion zone, meaning that any ship from any nation that approached the Falklands would be attacked. Then, on May 1, 1982, Admiral Juan Lombardo ordered all Argentine naval units to seek out the British task force around the Falklands and launch a massive attack. Almost immediately, Lombardo's signal was intercepted by British intelligence. Although the group was outside the declared total exclusion zone, the British determined that the approaching cruiser was a threat. In response, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and her war cabinet agreed to a request from her Chief of Defense Staff to approve an attack on General Belgrano. By then, the ship and her group were about to head toward the Argentine mainland. The sinking of General Belgrano. Minutes before 3 p.m. on May 2, 1982, HMS Conqueror fired 3 21-inch torpedoes at the Argentine cruiser ARA General Belgrano, located approximately 230 nautical miles southwest of the Falkland Islands. 2 out of the 3 reached the target. One of the torpedoes struck around 40 feet aft of the bow, outside the armor-protected area. This blow broke the ship's bow off. The second one punched through the vessel's side before exploding in the aft machine room, causing a large explosion that ripped a 66-foot-long hole in the main deck. After the eruption, the ship immediately filled with smoke. The blast also damaged the ship's electrical power system, preventing her crew from making a distress call. As the water began to flood the ship, Belgrano started to list to port and sink towards the bow. Captain Hector Bonzo then ordered everyone to abandon the ship, and hundreds of sailors began to run through the smoke and fires to evacuate. Severely damaged, General Belgrano rolled over and sank 30 minutes after the attack. Meanwhile, the 2 escort ships patrolling the area were unaware of the accident and continued their westward course. By the time the crews of the escorts finally suspected that something had happened to General Belgrano, it was already nightfall. With the worsening weather scattering the life rafts, the surviving crew waited for hours on end before the first Argentine reconnaissance aircraft were spotted in the skies. The ship's captain spent over 30 hours in the sea as one of the last men to be rescued, and he claims that sailors aboard the life rafts banded together and sang the Argentine national anthem time and time again during their ordeal. In the 3 days following the attack, 772 out of about 1,100 men were rescued by Chilean and Argentinian ships. Controversy. Although the sinking of General Belgrano happened 14 hours after a proposal of peace that called for regional unity issued by President of Peru Fernando Belaúnde, the Iron Lady and her team of diplomats back in London had not seen this document when they gave orders to attack. Throughout the entirety of the 2.5-month conflict, neither the United Kingdom nor Argentina officially declared war on each other. Initially, the Argentinian government, ruled by an oppressive military junta and quasi-dictator Leopoldo Galtieri, pushed to censor any news about the incident. When asked by the New York Times to corroborate the authenticity of a series of photos of the sinking taken by a crew member from Belgrano, the Argentine government attempted to stop their publication, and the press back home lauded an impending victory in favor of their nation. However, when censorship was no longer possible, and the story of the only ship to have been sunk during military operations by a nuclear-powered submarine began to spread throughout the world, the oppressive regime took a victim approach and called for international condemnation of the incident. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom claimed its right to address threats outside the exclusion zone, citing evidence from intercepted communications that the homeward course that the Argentinians claimed that Belgrano was making was false. Captain Bonzo later admitted the accusations. General Belgrano had every intention to take aggressive action against the Royal Navy in the name of the Falklands. The end of an unofficial conflict. Following the loss of the vessel, the remaining Argentinian fleet returned to base and played no major role in the rest of the conflict. Meanwhile, British nuclear submarines continued to operate in the waters between Argentina and the Falkland Islands for weeks, gathering intelligence, providing early warnings of air raids, and effectively imposing sea denial. After 74 days, Argentine Commander General Mario Menendez surrendered on June 14, 1982, returning the island's ownership to the United Kingdom. To this day, the sinking of General Belgrano remains controversial in Argentina and with the British left, largely due to the Defense Department's arguable stance and the enormous loss of life in a non-declared conflict. While the Argentinian Navy has since accepted the determination from international tribunals that the sinking was a permissible act of war, the loss of the crew continues to sting. General Belgrano, once the United States Navy's Phoenix cruiser, was the last survivor of the Pearl Harbor fleet to be lost to enemy action, even if the perpetrators turned out to be their longtime allies, the Royal Navy. Thank you for watching our Dark Seas video. Before you go, please give us a like and share this video with a friend who might like it. Also, for more history-inspired stories of the Seven Seas and beyond, subscribe to all our Dark Documentaries channels. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest content. Stay tuned.